Hello and welcome to the Marketing Times Analytics Podcast. I'm your host, Alex Sofronas, and today we're on with Christian Ray Flores. Christian, would you like to introduce yourself?
My name is Christian Ray Flores. I do brand strategy. I have a marketing company called Third Drive Media. I also do performance coaching. I do philanthropy, basically. I live in the US. I'm an international guy. I grew up on 3 continents, 4 countries. This is my 4th continent and 6th country living in the United States, and I love it.
Tell us more about your business.
Third Drive Media is basically a company that focuses on mostly personal brand development now. We've had several incarnations, right? So we started off as just video marketing because I come from the showbiz world, music videos, things like that. And then you do about us videos, commercials, things like that. And essentially it developed into more of a consultancy slash brand strategy company for tech founders, nonprofit leaders, people like that. And now I'm still doing that, and we're still doing sort of normal classic marketing stuff, like we just did a logo for NASA, for example, right? But I'm more focused now on personal brand development just because it works really well with a lot of people that I work with, the performance coaching, right?
So, what got you interested in the personal branding space?
I think it's just the fact that I already knew this. It's really interesting. My very first professional success, I was in Eastern Europe and I became one of the top pop stars in the former USSR, all that space, 15 countries, right? And that's essentially a classic personal brand play, right? You do something, you're known for something. In this particular case, it was music, and you design everything, this intellectual property, music videos, all of that stuff, the persona, the show, all of that is around a name specifically. And people like the name, and then you do other things, and people that like the first things start buying other things, or one medium, they watch you on TV, in the radio, they read about you online, and then they go to the show. That's another product, essentially. It's a show. Or they buy the next album. So it's all based on trust, right? And this sort of almost like this scalable trust, right? Scalable public reputation. So my very first success was that, and I was entertaining millions of people. And then for a while, I took a break from it and did other things that I was interested in. But it stuck with me forever because you can literally serve anyone, anywhere, at any time. You can find a niche and you'll find thousands of people who want exactly what you are offering. It could be a product, it could be a service, it could be music, it could be books, right? But it's never been easier to do, and it's like foolish not to do it. When I was doing it, it was foolish to do it because it was so hard to do. It was almost impossible to get your name out there at the time. I was just very lucky, and I worked hard, of course. But now, yes, it is still work, right? I think it's really more emotional labor than anything else. Belief in yourself, those are the barriers. But technology is no longer a barrier. Distribution is no longer a barrier, right? It's cheaper than ever to do. It's easier than ever to do. All you have to do is actually get to it and do it.
And what does the process look like for developing a personal brand and then weaving that into the videos that you make? Are you mapping out, like with a template, what your brand is, what it means to people? What does that actually look like in practice?
Yeah, it's basically you develop essentially almost like a matrix, right? And the matrix contains what are the core things that you offer? How do you communicate those things? What are the stories that illustrate that? But really, in the very beginning, is actually getting people to actually believe they have something to offer that is extremely valuable. And the reason for that is psychological primarily, because what we can do well, right? It's so easy for us to do that it doesn't seem valuable. It almost feels like your mind plays a trick on you. Of course, I can write up a legal document. Of course, I can play the guitar. Of course, I can do neural surgery. There's hundreds of neurosurgeons out there, even the most extraordinary things. I have a whole slew of things that I can do. None of them feel particularly valuable to me because they come so easily to me. So there's this psychological barrier at the very foundation of helping somebody with a personal brand strategy. And then after that, okay, let's find it. Let's really crystallize it. And now let's package it. Let's package it in a way that your specific person, your ideal customer will love, understand, totally, immediately connect with. What's the bundle of benefits that you offer? How do you compete with design as well? I think design comes later in the process. We help somebody develop a personal brand strategy, but then showing it in a design is almost like a vehicle. So it's not primary, but it's super important because design makes people feel a certain way, right? Helps people watch a video and not get bored, or look at your website and go, wow, this projects excellence, or this makes me feel something, on top of the messaging that makes you connect with whatever. It could be a nonprofit cause. It could be a book. It could be a service, right? I would say the latter of importance is you first develop the essence of the brand, then you develop the messaging behind it. I interviewed in my podcast one of the co-founders of Keurig Coffee, right? And he's doing this new thing, and he said the bundle of benefits. I'm like, yes, I'm going to remember that bundle of benefits. The guy's extraordinary, right? And it's okay. How do you serve in a way that is unique to you specifically? What's the bundle of benefits? And then after that, you message it. You teach people how to communicate. And to that, we developed usually this matrix where you can actually, at a glance, I can be looking at you in the camera, and I can have a little matrix here, and I said, these are the main talking points, these are the illustration stories, these are the values, these are the calls to action. This is the change that I want to produce in people, and I could see it at a glance. So then you develop the personal brand, you understand, you package it, and then how do you communicate to the world? So today I'm doing that. I'm borrowing your audience. You find it valuable enough for me to be a guest. And I'm communicating, hopefully in an eloquent way, some of the things that I know how to do, correct? And then somebody in the audience might go, oh man, this is exactly what I need.
Yeah.
I've been wrestling with this forever. And that's essentially what happens. But that's the general step-by-step of the process.
Okay, so do you have any examples of celebrities that have either a really good personal brand or a really bad personal brand? And would you say that to become a celebrity, you must have a good personal brand?
A personal brand is another word for reputation. That's all it is. It's what's your reputation at scale. With some effort, some discipline, some energy. And anyone who you have an interaction with is going to look you up, right? And they're going to, what are they going to see? You can put my name in on Google, and you'll see a personal brand immediately. Like, you're not going to have to scroll through 4 or 5 Google pages, right? And the very first page, you'll find a personal brand. You can make that experiment if you're in the audience, right? What if people put your name into Google? What are they going to see? Are they going to see anything? If they see nothing, that doesn't help you gain credibility. But if they see something, what is that something that they see? Is it compelling? Is it clear? Is it winsome? Is it inspiring? Does it speak to the right audience? Those are the questions that you need to answer, right? But bottom line, it's reputation at scale. That's what it is, right? A good personal brand is somebody who is not fake, because people feel fake. They can sense fake. They can sense hype. I don't think that's a good personal brand. You can have a very powerful personal brand and be completely fake. The age of Instagram and TikTok is full of people like that.
Mm-hmm.
It is a personal brand, but it's really an illusion. I think you're living a lie, and it's not going to help you. It's going to make you some money, but you're going to feel very incoherent long term, and you're probably not going to succeed long term or at the scale that you're supposed to, that you are actually very capable of, you know. But a good personal brand is one that is authentic, that is generous, that is clear, that is compelling, that ripples, right? There's a domino effect of, man, have you heard this guy? When he talks about personal growth, the things that he emphasizes, that's incredible. You need to watch this. I want to share this with you. That's a good personal brand. And then a bad personal brand, I would say, is there are people that are very loud, obnoxious people. Yeah, but I think it's a bad personal, not in the sense that it's not effective. It's probably effective, but I think it doesn't bring goodness into the world. You know.
So what are some examples of celebrities in either case?
Andrew Tate, to me, he's extraordinarily effective in his branding. very consistent in his branding. And he actually, the good thing about Andrew Tate is that he tapped into an actual need. Men feeling diminished, disrespected, disoriented, disempowered. That's the need that he tapped into, and it's a massive need. Absolutely. That's why there's traction. I think the problem with that is that when a brand communicates the need well, and I think he does, but then communicates the solution that is distorted, toxic, offsetting the meaning, I think that's a bad personal brand, personally. Now, that might still make him rich, but I don't respect that, because you can tap into, if you have a conspiracy theory person, right? You can tap into the truth that people really feel that they're being lied to. That's a conspiracy theory niche. The need is that they've been lied to. And the truth is, we're being lied to a lot, but a lot of people who have control all kinds of things, right? So people feel it. People know that it's true. But then the person who takes that need and then inflames suspicion and hatred and just basically puts more fuel on the fire. So really what they do is they take advantage of that need instead of, in a healthy way, discerning, being nuanced, and saying, this actually does look like a conspiracy. We should investigate it, and this is why. That we should be rigorous about our understanding of conspiracy. And this is not a conspiracy, actually. So let's relax. Let's just understand that this is not a big deal, right? But people that tap into that and they want more clicks because that can be monetized, and they actually throw more fuel, I don't think it's a good way to go about the personal brand. I think a good brand brings good to people, you know? A good brand, like, I don't know if you know the podcaster Ed Milet. He's a big business podcaster. And I love Ed. And the reason for that is because he's extraordinarily effective. He's a great entrepreneur. He's done really well for himself. But he has this podcast. It's one of the biggest podcasts in business. And he is so authentic and genuine and loves people so much. And when he invites a guest, he praises his guest. He points out the nuance of the goodness in the guest. And people are attracted to that. And he offers solutions, and he has real talk and tells people how they need to change, and he can challenge you. But he has this incredibly benevolent personal brand that caught fire, right? So you can go on and on when it comes to that kind of thing, right? But yeah, absolutely. I think a personal brand is not a notoriety. Notoriety is for notoriety's sake, I think, has massive flaws and, is a net minus impact on the world.
Okay. So when you're thinking about thinking about my personal brand, am I thinking purely from the perspective of me and what's authentic to myself? Or am I also weighing what are the needs of the society that I'm operating in that I can fulfill?
Yeah.
And starting from the perspective of the society's needs?
So, excellent question. And I think that's the eternal question of marketing and just in general, right? Because it's basically like the chicken and the egg type situation. It is attention that you hold the tension of both. It's a yes and. So I'll give you an example. So this is a book that I just published, right? So I'm putting a plug for the book that I just published called Little Book of Big Reasons to Love America, right? In this book, the need that I perceive is that people are very confused or disillusioned about their own country. Americans are. And they need to be, without being lied to or without glossing over the flaws of the nation, they need to be encouraged and inspired about very specific things that are extremely valuable in the American culture. So that's the need. So I am orienting myself to that need. And that's why the title is Little Book of Big Reasons to Love America. It's very specific. And it's also very specific to what's in the book. We're going to have a list of reasons to love America. So it's that specific. It's 10 chapters, 10 reasons, right? So from that standpoint, I am respecting, I am intuiting, I am capturing the need. This is the need. People are disoriented about the value of American culture. I would like to bring an optimistic voice. That's the need. Now, solution that I offer, right, in the form of a book, that's not who I am in the very essence of who I am. Who I am is an immigrant. That's why the subtitle is Love Letter from an Immigrant. What I am is a guy who grew up, who's lived in 6 countries, 4 continents, and has seen, for example, my experiences living under Marxism and tyranny and hardship and poverty and understanding. I'm also an economist. So I go, guys, this whole free market thing is a really important thing, and it's fragile. People understand it, but people don't really create the environment for it and talk about prosperity, about culture, about faith, about family values, things like that. The things that really came together in America in a very unique way. So I basically say, from my perspective and as an outsider, this is extraordinarily rare, very important, and very valuable. Not only to Americans, but actually to the rest of the world, because it overflows. So authentically saying, this is from my experience, this is my insight. It's very authentic to me. On top of that, I'm an artist, right? So you will see it's high design. There's a mix of illustrations, like AI-generated illustrations and personal archives. So it's high visual, immersive kind of stuff. There's a lot of quotes. It's social multidimensional. So if you go to a chapter title and there's a QR code, you'll go to this QR code and you'll see a video of me talking about more of that stuff. What is that? That's authentically me, right? I'm a multimedia guy. I'm an artist. I want to inspire you visually as well. My point is, it's both, right? You understand what the need is and you try to cater to the need, because I would just written an autobiography or a memoir. And what's the need for my memoir in the world? 0. I'm not important enough. Objectively, if I was Barack Obama, Donald Trump, or Elon Musk, there's a need for a memoir, because you are a universally known persona that has shifted the world in a particular way. I'm not that person. Maybe regionally, in my past lives, yes, I could have done that. But here, I don't think that's the need. No average American has the need to understand my life story. But there is a need that I can fulfill. The need is to help, as an immigrant, help Americans get a perspective and not downplay some of the flaws of the nation, but to actually point out in an optimistic and clear way the treasure that they have here in this country.
So yeah, it's definitely both sides, what society need and what you provide in your personal brand. And then that Venn diagram commonalities is where you land with the personal brand. Is that right?
Yeah, absolutely. What problem are you solving? Basically. So in this book, I'm solving a problem for somebody. When I do personal brand development, I'm solving a problem. They have expertise. They don't know how to package, communicate that expertise in a way that's compelling to a specific group of people. Who do they communicate it to, et cetera?
So then do you recommend that the person who's deciding on the personal brand, that they model it after a successful person in that area? If I look at different marketing influencers and see one that is working in an area that I'm interested in, would I try to emulate that person in my personal brand, or would I take a different approach and try to be different than that person who's already addressing the area that I want to work in?
I think I would say one is, who are you specifically? Trusting in your innate uniqueness, which sounds very hokey, but I promise you it makes a lot of sense, right? People don't trust their unique expertise enough to actually say it. This is how I see it. I know this works and this is why, because they're afraid to fail. So they try to imitate somebody else. So I wouldn't do that, because you're going to be a bad copy of somebody else. It's better to be the best original of you. That's the first thing. And that is actually emotionally painful and hard to do. That's part of the emotional labor of personal brand development, is really unearthing the treasure that you have right under your feet, rather than borrowing somebody else's thing, right? Now, what you can and should imitate is strategy, right? Okay, this person took this strategy, got to this place, this strategy. You pick a strategy and you try it, and it may not work for you, but you're moving forward. Also, not all strategies are like, if Ed Milet has one strategy because he's that person, he had this success early on, and his sort of step-by-step was this and this, the stepping stones to his success. I might imitate the exact same strategy, but because of just one or two missing components of my journey, it just won't work. Same exact strategy, right? So I would say absolutely study what people do, 100%. Study what they do, try something. If it doesn't work, don't give up, try something else. But definitely study, because you don't want to reinvent the wheel, right? Okay, what are the wheels? But then you can experiment, and it's a beautiful thing. The journey is messy usually, but the most important thing is not execution, because you won't execute well necessarily at all. Everybody fails at one point or another. The most important thing is to really understand who you are, what kind of problems you're solving, and then just going after it over and over again.
What about when it goes wrong? Let's say you're building a good personal brand and then something happens. Maybe you make a bad comment or some news comes out that's damaging. How do you recommend somebody fixes their personal brand?
Honestly, the scenario that you're describing is already of a successful person. You'll worry about that when you get really successful. If people care enough that someone actually picks it up in the news somewhere, you've done really well for yourself. Don't worry about that. You'll figure it out later. Because honestly, when you're starting off, no one cares. The people that actually notice are people who either you don't care if they don't like it. The people that do notice that you care usually love you and support you regardless. So it's your friends, your family, your sort of core group, whatever, of followers or supporters. Anyway, they're like, hey, don't worry about it. But the truth is, no one cares. And it's a beautiful feeling. But it doesn't feel like that because you're like public, quote unquote. You know, you're starting a YouTube channel, there's 50 viewers or whatever. It doesn't matter at all. You know, so oh my gosh, people are gonna think I'm terrible. I think the lighting was awful, and I had some pauses over here, and I said something, it was awkward. Who cares? Just do the work, keep doing it, and you'll get better and better and better. I've had interviews just like what I'm having with you, where I was off, and on average now I do a guest podcast a day. I do a lot of these, and sometimes you're just off and you second guess yourself. And I remember texting a friend who interviewed me on his podcast. I'm like, I feel like I was down or something, and I was in this mode. And he goes, what are you talking about? You were deep. You were in the mood of depth. And I thought it was fantastic. And I was like, all right, I'll get over it. The point is, we're so self-conscious, so fearful of what other people think. And one of the beautiful things about the universe of the internet, right, where there's like millions of YouTube videos uploaded every minute. In that ocean, the drop of what you do now that might be below average, it gets diluted. Right? It doesn't matter. Eventually, when you become this big shot, yes, it will matter. But that's where authenticity comes in, right? If you build your brand on fake, on a front, on a facade, it's going to be hard for you to navigate being in the public eye, because you're just not authentic. You're protecting something. But if you're authentic and you're real, so you say something that is off or maybe it's tone deaf in an interview, if you're an authentic person and they know you for that, and that's why they like you, all you do is come up and say, hey, I'm sorry I said that. I didn't mean it that way. That's it. It's that simple. Not a big deal.
Okay, so a lot of that protection is really in the pre-work, in making sure that what you're known for or known as is authentic.
Yeah.
Because, like you said, once you get into trouble, that's when you have to be honest. And if you haven't been honest up until then, you have to pretend to be honest under
Yeah.
this false persona. Is that right?
Yeah, exactly. Remember that Super Bowl show where Justin Timberlake and Janet Jackson had the wardrobe malfunction? And it's basically he tore off her like a piece of her clothing that was orchestrated, but it revealed more than they wanted to reveal. That kind of thing.
Mhm.
So people were upset because it's expected to be a family show, right? It's the Super Bowl. The way Janet responded to it was very contained, very controlled. She probably has an army of strategists and publicists who are whispering in her ear, don't go on this show, or go on that show, and this is what you say, this is what you do, and you can feel it. The way Justin responded was so authentic, and he was like, I'm so very sorry. You could just see that he means it. And as a spectator, somebody who watches that unfold, it's the same situation, the same mistake, two different ways to do it at the same time, which is a great illustration in my opinion, right? And I am much more compassionate towards Justin because I can feel that he means it. And I'm a little bit less compassionate, maybe a little bit more skeptical of Janet because she comes across as protecting the brand rather than acknowledging, hey, that was a mistake.
Okay. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. What are some misconceptions related to personal brands, what people might think they are or how to do it versus the reality?
I think the biggest misconceptions that I would love people to hear is that I'm not good enough, smart enough, pretty enough, eloquent enough, expert enough to have a personal brand. I think that's the biggest misconception. It is an absolute lie. Most of us should have a personal brand. If we want to serve more people, we should have it because it's really trusting that you have something to offer and leaning into it and becoming more of an expert in it and then sharing it with the world. I think it's not really a sort of option, it's really more of a responsibility, in my opinion, because it's basically just reputation. That's all it is. It's just digitized, scaled reputation. You already have a personal brand. It's just so small that if somebody looks you up, they won't know. But you already have a personal brand. Ask your friends, hey, how is he with his family? How is he in the workplace? How is he with his employees? How is she when she's in a crisis? The people around you already have a picture of that in their minds, right? What problem does she solve? That we have to call her specifically for that problem. People already know, right? The problem is that not enough people know that. So I think that has to be this sort of super glamorous, over the top, very expensive. They look at some of the big shots and you go, I'm not that. Clearly, I'm not that. I'll never be that. And the thing is, you shouldn't be that. You shouldn't compare yourself to other people. And that's the beauty of 2024, 2025. The state of the world is that you can have an Instagram account that does this particular thing. Tens of thousands of people will want this particular thing, right? Or a YouTube channel or something else, right? Or a newsletter on Substack. And you're a normal person. And then all of a sudden, because you trust yourself, you trust that you have this passion that drives you, the solution that you want to offer to the world. More people get wind of it and they send it to other people, etc. To give you an example, joking around this at the dinner table, Christmas Day. So I have 3 daughters. My youngest is 20. My oldest is 29. And the youngest, this summer, she blew up on Instagram, right? So she has essentially a personal brand about healthy living. She's a very happy, extroverted girl, and she's traveling and she's documenting, and there's sports, there's health, it's active. She went to Hawaii, she was diving with sharks, things like that, right? She has 80 plus now thousand subscribers, and her average video is about 70,000. She posted one, she broke up with her girlfriend. It got 18 million views. It was probably 30 seconds, maybe. Think about that. She's 20. She's not even out of college. And somehow there's enough people that care about her specifically, her tastes, where she goes, what she does, that she gets millions of views. And we're joking about that because all her life growing up, she was, oh, you're Christian Ray's kid. You know, especially if we went to Eastern Europe, that people still knew who I was, etc. And then here, maybe there's a reputation, etc. I lead in several organizations. Oh, you're Christian Ray's kid. Okay, got it. Now, I am like Isabella Flores' dad. Oh, she's the celebrity, right? And I'm going, hey, can you plug my book, honey? Can you put like a story with a link, please? She's okay, dad, sure. Use me for my fame. And so that was the banter. Is I was saying to the girls, you know what? I really want for all 3 of you to be so extraordinarily good at what you are that when people in your circles meet me, they go, oh, you're her dad. She's amazing. So we all toasted to the student surpassing the master type of dynamic. But I think that anyone can do that. My point is, right? If a 20-year-old can do that, she's not even in college, and she can find value that she can bring to the world. And people are grateful. They follow her. There's an emotional connection. So can you, basically.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. You must be really proud of her.
Yeah. I really am. I'm a little worried about fame because fame wrecked me a little bit when I was young, when I was actually about her age, slightly older, but I'm very proud of her. Yes. It's good to see you do something that you love, and then there's enough of a response where your self-esteem just goes up, right? And you go, man, I want to do more of that. People value what I do. And I think that's the point. It's really good for us to lean into that because it's scary and it's hard and it takes a while. But then the minute and somebody answering your weekly newsletter say, man, that really helped me, thank you. And you see them sending it to each other. Or I'm getting all these texts for the book that I just released. And they're like, hey, I brought 3 copies because I want my mom to read the book as well. And then this other young person needs to know what it's like to grow up outside of the US or whatever. So it's so cool. But it takes this leap of faith, right? Like even writing the book. I've done all kinds of creative things, award-winning creative things in life, but I've never written a book that I published. I actually wrote 2 that I tabled, but I tabled them because I know that it's not up to par, right? And when I write it, and when you write it, it's scary. It really is, because you go, I'm putting myself out there. Is this good enough? Is it going to add value? And you're stopped by your fears instead of leaning into your passions. And then, yeah, your first draft is going to suck. It's going to be terrible. My first draft was horrible. I did 5 or 6 different rewrites of the book before I was like, okay, this is good enough. But most people, they just stop at the first draft. They stop before the first draft. So, or they stop at the second draft. And my point is that's the biggest tension, the biggest obstacle to developing a personal brand is fear.
That makes sense.
And that's good news because it's actually not real. No one's going to expel you from the tribe for doing a mediocre job on your first try. No one's going to do that. People care about you, right? And people who don't care about you, who cares? It's fine. Do the work.
Yeah. And that's a growth mindset, right? That's really enlightening. Do you have any other tips for approaching development of a personal brand?
I actually probably, it's a little bit of a plug for what I do, but I do what I do because I believe in it. And it's connected directly to what you just said about a growth mindset. If you look up on my podcast, I interviewed David Yeager, his name is. He's a PhD. He's a professor here at UT in Austin. And he's a leading expert in growth mindset in the world. And so it was a fascinating interview just in general. But one thing that he pointed out that I thought was a huge takeaway and very validating for me for the thing that I do with coaching is he said that principle, the 10,000 hours, and that's how you reach mastery. I said, yeah, and everybody knows it's a very sticky concept, right? It gets quoted all the time. And he says, the guy who developed that theory before he died, and I forget his name, he said, one thing I missed about that principle is that the people that reach great mastery after putting 10,000 hours, all of them had a coach or a mentor. And it's almost like coaching and mentoring, getting somebody who can see around corners, can see ahead, the things that you can't see. Having somebody like that, it almost amplifies the 10,000 hour principle. You get there faster. And most importantly, you don't give up. You don't get hurt too much, so much so that you just don't stop doing it. So being coached is an incredible investment of time, treasure, and talent. I believe in it deeply. That's why I do it. But I do it because somebody did it for me. I was at the top of my career. I was 26. I had a #1 hit, and I was clinically depressed. And then this guy came into my life. He was a missionary, Canadian missionary. And he helped me out, and he's put me back together, even in doing the thing that I was so good at. So I really believe that high performers, you can be at the peak of your talents, of your powers even, and you can still have massive gaps in your character that will prevent you from reaching the peak of what you can do for the world. But if you get coached, if you get counseling, coaching, mentoring, you can go further and longer, in what you're supposed to be doing in this world.
And what are the different components of character that you need to make sure are all built out?
I would say the things that I usually work on in the very first stretch, maybe like 3-4 months when I coach people, is this. The first one is, how do you run on the right kind of fuel, right? If you're a high performer, let's say you're driving this high performance car. Did you notice that all high performance cars run on only premium fuel?
Mhm.
Why? Because they were built for that. So you were built for high performance. You feel like you're called to do that, but you're running on anxiety, on envy, on self-doubt, on self-sabotage, on all kinds of stuff. That's bad fuel. The first thing I address usually is, how do I get you every single day to be able to switch from bad fuel to good fuel and to go from anxiety to creativity? And because those things are mutually exclusive, right? You can't really create new things if you're anxious all the time. It can't coexist in the same person. But if you're creating new things, that actually displaces anxiety. So how do you go from anxiety, stress, survival mode into creativity, vision, growth mindset? That's the first thing. The second thing is, how do you fight against the things that show up when you start moving forward? Self-doubt is the thing that starts, I call it resistance, right? Yeah, you immediately feel this really like power pressing down on you. So how do you acknowledge it, because it's inevitable, and how do you overcome it? The third thing I coach in is, how do you develop a direction and develop momentum where you're actually moving consistently forward? Because people just stop and they go in circles and they ruminate too much. They just don't act. And then the fourth thing I talk about is having a holistic view of your life. And it's 7 different dimensions of life. In the long run, these are the things that matter the most. So if you don't pay attention to them, you're going to hit a wall sooner rather than later. And that literally works like a charm, both in the positive sense and in the negative sense. Like most high achievers, they hyper focus on just their work and underestimate these other dimensions. And eventually they hit a wall and they pay for it in all kinds of ways: health, wealth, divorce, and definitely in opportunity costs, because now they can't do what they do so well at a higher level or consistently. So those are the things that I usually do. This is just the beginning in coaching. And I think that's why I believe in coaching, because whoever you use as a coach, those are the kind of things you need to pay attention to. And those are the things that you don't pay attention to if you're hustling. It's very hard to really work on the important when there's so much urgent stuff pulling at you.
So you mentioned good fuel versus bad fuel. I've always had this lingering question in my mind that if I were to be meaner to myself, maybe I would be more productive. And that there's a lot of people out there who really bully themselves, and it's a very tough mindset.
Mm.
What's your perspective on that? Do you think that you could go faster if you're tougher on yourself? Or do you think that the question is really like how long you can go rather than how fast? And
Yeah,
that's where the good fuel comes in.
I think it really depends on the nuance, right? But I would say in demanding can be unloving to yourself. And that's bad fuel. And that can actually that can really accelerate you, but you'll hit a wall, and so I find a lot of highly professional people, they have a lot of mixed fuel. I mean, everybody has mixed fuel, but they have a lot of that. For example, my dad wasn't present and he was never satisfied. So you're basically fueled by to prove your dad wrong and to be good enough for your dad, who probably actually loves you. That didn't mean to be that way with you, or has probably just repented 1,000 times since then, but you still have that fuel. And that is bad fuel because it is negative, it's toxic, and you never get the result because your dad is changed, for example, or he's dead, or maybe he's still that way, but it doesn't solve anything, you know? So there's stuff like that, Now, they can still be negative. For example, you can be fueled by negative things, but in a positive way. So, for example, for me, I come from 3 generations of broken homes. And I just didn't know how to build a family, didn't know how to build a marriage. And I was very aware that I don't know how to do it, that I suck at this. When I first started really leaning into being coached and everything, that was my first thing. Teach me how to build a romantic relationship? How do I find a mate? How do I marry somebody? How do I stay married? How do I even know who to pursue? I know the stats are who you marry is literally the most important factor in your happiness long term. There's all kinds of studies about it, 5 or 6 times more important than your work. It's the most important thing. And of course, that's my weakest spot for me. I basically decided, you know what? I'm going to dedicate a lot of my energy, my talent, my focus, my coachability to understanding romance, marriage, and parenting. Because I never, ever went to see divorce in my life. So it's a negative motivation, but it's a good fuel. And as a result of that, I've been married for 25 years, happily. My kids love me. They have zero chance of being heartbroken kids picking up the pieces after a divorce. Zero. It ain't going to happen. So that's a negative motivation of what you don't want, but it moves you to a positive place.
I love that. Yeah, that's really enlightening. I want to thank you, Christian, for joining and sharing all of this. And thanks everyone for listening. We'll talk to you soon.